Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 418. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of
How's it going, eh?
Jim, on this episode, we're going to be joined by longtime friend of the show, Art Lyon, as we discuss shows like Gotham, The Flash, and Arrow. Besides that, we're going to be discussing some of the recent news relating to those series, but also kind of our speculation of what we think about these series crossing over with each other and what we'd like to see in the future from that type of thing. Talk about film, our feelings as far as should they cross over in the film universe, should they not? All kinds of different discussion relating to that. Then you and I this is actually going to be a two-part episode. We're also going to have a segment where you and I talk about Constantine and how we're feeling about that series. So it's all big two-part look at all of DC in television. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the InfiniteComics.com podcast partnership. Sponsoring this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, I'm a big fan of statues and collectibles and props, and I think in recent years we've seen a lot more swag coming out. I saw something really cool. I was, looking at the DC collectibles. They have a DC Comics Mother Box prop replica.
Yeah.
I'm eyeing that baby because it's a $60, $59.95 regularly. It's 32% off. The DCB service price is $40, $40.77. And it's just cool because it's something different. I'm also, they got that Wonder Woman statue and the Superman statue. I always get, like one statue or prop or something like that. And the Mother Box one is just, I think it's an interesting conversation piece. It lights up, too, and has sound.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if it actually opens up a boom tube. But that'd be kind of cool. I just kind of like those kind of props and replicas and things. This one in particular, I think, would be an interesting conversation piece. So I'm really eyeing that. I'm a fan of this, and whenever I'm shouting it out, a lot of times we talk about DCB service, we talk about comics and graphic novels and trades and things you can order. Collectibles is something that's really great about DCBService.com. You can get that stuff on pre-order. A lot of times these collectibles have a very limited run to them, and if you don't get them initially, you wind up paying a premium beyond what the retail cost is. When you get them from DCBService.com, you can get them at a discount. And that, for me, is the deciding factor a lot of times between getting something like this and not. It's the discount part ahead of time. Because when you and I both know, we try to seek things out, and premium prices on those things often make it very hard to justify when you get into that. So I want to thank DCBService.com for the pre-orders. Over at InStockTrades.com, I want to shout out two things. First of all, they have wonderful 50% off deals all the time. First one is Aquaman and the Others, trade paperback volume 1. It's 50% off, only $8.49. I'm also going to shout out a Marvel book, Legendary Star-Lord volume 1. And the reason why I'm shouting this out, one of the issues is done by longtime friend of the show, Freddie E. Williams II. So, and it's his first Marvel work, so I'm very interested in picking up this trade paperback to... I haven't been reading Legendary Star-Lord, and I got the issue that Freddie did, but I'd like the whole surrounding arc, if that makes sense. So it's 50% off, only $8.49 over at InStockTrades.com. This is where I go to. It's my go-to source for I missed that trade, I missed that hardcover, get it, at all kinds of discount prices. But every week, they've got deals of the week that are 50% off. They've got, those Masterworks books. They've got the Uncanny X-Men, Volume 9, 50% off, only $37.50. I mean, those prices are just amazing, and that's InStockTrades.com. So I want to thank both of those sites for sponsoring our show. James, we're talking television. What kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotlines, story twists, and whatnot regarding The Flash, Gotham, Arrow, and Constantine TV shows. So if you aren't caught up with these shows, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk DC television.
He is called Hawkman. His gauntlets possess awesome powers.
Joining us again is longtime friend of the show, Art Lyon, as we are going to be discussing the DC television shows, and we'll probably kind of geek out about comic book television in general. But Art, as always, welcome back to Raging Bullets.
Well, thank you for having me on once again. It's like old school week. It's
we really have a rich history of doing comic book related media together, because this goes back to the Smallville days.
How many years has this been? I don't know.
Well, I'll have to take a look.
Smallville.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was only a couple seasons into Smallville, probably, when we started talking about Smallville. So, and I can't remember what years Smallville was on.
Well, we right now, this March it's year 9, right, Jim?
Yeah.
So we've been doing the podcast 9 years.
Yes.
You're coming up on a 10th anniversary, basically.
Yeah. So
Wow.
what we're going to be, after March, we're going to be 1 year away from 10 years of doing this. It had to have been, if not the first year of our podcast, easily you were in on the second year of our podcast. I want to say the first year we probably started having our discussion. So you've been doing this with us for 7.5 to 8 years.
Well, I'm looking here at the first episode of Smallville was fall of 2001. Last episode, of course, was May of 2011.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of jibes. Yeah. Yeesh.
So, guys, DC television and just comic book television in general, we were talking casually right before we started recording about comic book television. For a while, you would get a show, and that really was something you'd latch onto, and whether it was great, terrible, or somewhere in the middle, we all flocked to it because it was like, wow, they're putting our properties on television. Now it's a completely different ball game where not only do we have all these shows from DC and Marvel, they're going into a lot of indies. There's stuff going on the web. We have services like Netflix that are now getting original programming, like Daredevil's going to be on there, but other Marvel programming's been listed for there. I'm very excited. I don't know if you guys heard the news, but it looks like CW Warner's going to be doing a web series for Vixen that's going to be animated. Yeah, it's set in the Arrow and Flash universe, so those characters are going to be making appearances in that. That's
the thing I was going to add there is that not only do we have these shows, but they interact with each other, and they interact with, at least in the case of the Marvel stuff, they interact with the movies. And so it's, we didn't have anything like this when we were kids. The joke I made, I think, on one of the discussion threads on your Facebook page was, when I was a kid, all we had was the Amazing Spider-Man show, which was not good. But it's all we had, and it was Spider-Man. So we watched it.
I remember the first time I saw Spider-Man live action, it was on Electric Company as a kid growing up. And then they had that show that you're talking about. The funny part is I've seen it now as an adult. And I remember as a kid loving it because I was a Spider-Man sponge. But you're right, it was awful. But as a kid, I did not have that. As a kid, I remember loving it because it was real. I mean, you had Spider-Man because we didn't have the benefit of Spider-Man on the big screen. Right. So that was our first real live-action Spider-Man that wasn't like a guest spot on like Electric Company or something. Right. And I just remember going, oh, this is really cool and all that. Boy, how far television's gone.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, there's still plenty of bad stuff. But if you look back in the last 10 or 15 years of TV, there's been like a real uptick in the quality of the good shows, basically. I think it kind of, I don't know, you can track it back probably in lots of ways, but I track it back to The West Wing, which I think started in 1999. There may have been other shows, earlier, and like I said, you could probably track it back in different ways, but, you look at all the growth of shows like The Sopranos and The Wire and these shows that have shorter seasons and really good writing, just really great writing. TV is not like it was when we were kids. It's a different ballgame, kind of.
Now, the big question I had, we kind of started heading down this. Actually, Art, you were bringing it up. You talked about how the Marvel universe, the TV universe, ties heavily into the film universe. Now, with the DC television, they're tied to, well, I should say Flash and Arrow are tied together, and this Vixen series are going to be tied. Right. There's also rumors that maybe there'll be another spinoff of The Atom or something like that.
I want that show.
I do too.
I think Brandon Routh deserves that show.
Now, here's my question. One of the things that seems to pop up, and you mentioned the Facebook group, not only in the Facebook group but on the internet, the debate comes up a lot of times as far as should DC be following the Marvel route and have their television universe tie into film. How important is that to you guys? Like, is that something that's essential to you? Are you happy with how things are now? What's your kind of wish list on all this with how the film universe seems to be panning out versus the television universe? Does it matter?
I don't think it matters to me. I mean, I just want each of those experiences, to be fun, to be something I enjoy. Obviously, but I don't need them to be interwoven like that. I like that the Marvel stuff is because it gives you all these little rewards, for watching all of the stuff and reading the comics. You get all these Easter eggs and all this stuff that you wouldn't have if they weren't interconnected. I don't want to be spoiled by that, right? And so, I think DC has to do their own thing, and they don't want to imitate what Marvel's doing, even if it might arguably be a smarter move, but I don't know that it is a smarter move. It's we'll see, I guess. But in short, no, I don't need that. It's not important to me.
Jim?
Actually, I'm very comfortable with the TV. I like the TV way, and it's funny because if you had asked me this question years ago, I would have answered completely different. I would have said, "Oh yeah, connect everything." But I like the fact that the television, they're combining television shows because you get more television shows per year. You get better special effects, you get more money thrown into a movie, but overall screen time, overall character growth and development, you get more on the small screen than you do the big screen. Just take a look at how within a couple seasons, how much the cast and crew of Arrow have grown and changed. You wouldn't get that if these were Arrow movies. It would be, 3 movies, and, maybe you would get, if there was a show connecting, maybe there would be some growth that way, but it's not. I think you're getting more of the story, and a TV show fits the comic book model better than the movie does.
Do you want them connected to the films?
It doesn't need to be. I'm glad as long as the TV shows are connected. Any new TV show they add, they should add to this universe. There shouldn't be a TV show out there that's not part of this universe. That's one of the things one of the things I wish about Gotham and Constantine, that they were directly, all this was interconnected, because we have this medium should be connected. The TV and movie, it doesn't need to be. If they did, I wouldn't complain. Like if it turns out this Gotham connects with the Batman on the big screen, I wouldn't have an issue with that at all. But I do want to see the TV shows connect. I like that. It's, again, as I said, character growth for me. It's, you think like, for me, Star Trek Next Generation always beats the Star Trek movie franchises, just because I have more episodes, I have more character growth, I have more comfort with them.
Well, you can tell different stories in a TV series than you can in movies. You can tell smaller stories. Yeah,
it's funny when I'm thinking about this. It's a couple things that Art said earlier connected with my feelings about the whole thing. I'm a big fan of great writing. And I think that needs to be the first most important thing, whether it's film or it's television, and it's got to be fun. You mentioned fun before, Art, and I've got to have that feeling. I'm a fan of the interconnectivity, so please don't get me wrong on this. Like, I like what Marvel's doing a great deal. I almost hearken it to the differences between the Marvel universe and the DC universe. When I pick up a comic set in the Marvel universe, I don't want them trying to be DC. I think that I've always looked at the two universes as different. I actually think it's an important quality of both of them. So I don't mind that they have this, like, plan from film that led into television for them, and it's all interconnected and it seems to work. On the DC end, I like that Gotham is set clearly in a different timeline than Flash and Arrow, so I don't know why it should. I guess I don't want it to be connected because it doesn't make sense for it to be connected with the Age of Bruce in it. So that's the case. And Jim, I'm not really saying that to dispute you. I know where you were kind of going with that. But there's we've been introduced to the idea that Supergirl is going to be coming, Krypton's going to be coming as a TV show. I don't know that if those are being done by similar studios, they're going to be connected or not. As long as they're well written and tell good stories, I don't really care. Krypton in and of itself doesn't make sense to be connected because that's supposed to be Krypton before, I think. Obviously, it would have to be before Superman actually leaves. So, very similar to comics. It could be great. There's
space and that's
crossing over Jor-El on the next Flash. We like you way better than your son.
It will be that, but with flashbacks of before it blew up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But every episode's a flashback. I'm looking forward to seeing which of those properties come to fruition. I think one of my preferences is, like, one of the things I like about Constantine is Constantine seems to be pulling a lot more from the Vertigo side of it than from the DC version. I know that the DC version of Constantine they're doing right now is really close to Vertigo, but they're clearly pulling from stories and lore that are more Vertigo-y in their nature. Maybe that's just because it's on television and things look a little edgier. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about Constantine right now. We'll save that towards the end, but I don't necessarily feel that every one of these have to be forced in her interconnectivity. I think what works about the Flash and Arrow, when they have a crossover, when Arrow appears on Flash, when, those 2 episodes where they were together, I loved every moment of that because it felt effortless. The differences between the 2 programs were very apparent, but it wasn't forced. Ollie's world is very different than Barry's world. I love that it feels that way because that's how it feels to me in the comics. And it felt natural. It didn't feel like they were trying to make us think something that wasn't there. It was just great writing that organically fits that way. If there's another show that they force into that mix, like I'm with Art when you're geeking out about, hey, if they do an Atom show, I'm in. I think that's going to be fantastic because Brandon Routh's doing a great job. I don't want them to all of a sudden feel like we've got to do like 3 other characters and force them into that mix just because this is working. I only want them to do it if there's a very strong premise, good writing, and it fits for a reason. So that's working for me. The crossover in and of itself, let's kind of talk about that because we haven't had a chance to talk about the crossover. How did you guys feel about the crossover? Did you like that?
Well, I like that we've had 2 crossovers. We had the Arrow episodes that had Barry in them, and that kind of established what a different kind of person Barry is compared to Oliver, and kind of set the tone for the Flash series. Right. It's interesting how well those 2 shows play off each other and how you have these characters who provide a link between them. If you look at the Felicity character on Arrow, she's a lot of times she's the comedic relief in some ways, and she blends well, I think, into what she's on Flash. I think that works really well. And you also have some darker aspects on Flash, usually involving Wells, which I think played well when Green Arrow was on the Flash episode of the crossover.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the things, I guess that's what I meant before about forced. None of that felt forced. It was very smooth. Wells was very much being the same Wells that you would see interacting with Barry. But because Ollie was in the mix and he was an unknown quantity that he didn't have control over, we got to see him showing a lot of the true colors we see him doing behind the scenes right up in your face. And I loved how those appearances, and you saw the same thing when Flash was on Arrow. You get to see the characters behaving differently because of each other.
One of my favorite things, I guess when the Flash was on Arrow, was Diggle's reactions. I thought were hilarious because we don't get to see that actor or the character do much in the way of comedy. And his reactions to Barry, I thought, were really funny.
Yeah, because usually he's deferring to Ollie, but it's more serious in tone. In the case of, And they're very grounded in reality. The weapons that they're using and things like that, it's if they deal with a supernatural character, they're taking that character down. And it's a different sort of context than when you're working with a guy and intimately seeing that kind of power. Mm-hmm. It really does reflect very much like on episodes like Suicide Squad, where you see Diggle having to be very serious and very wary around those characters. It was a nice contrast. You mentioned comedy a couple of times. One of the things that I think has been a strength of how these shows use comedy, characters seem to start off on like this one-dimensional level of getting to know them. As the series goes on, you get to see, like, if a character starts out as a comedic character, they start out that way, but then you get to know more about them. And as you do, they kind of enter this second dimension of there's more to them than just that comedic element. There's another layer there. And then as the show's gone on, Felicity's a great example of this. That's a character who really has become three-dimensional. We've seen her very serious, we've seen her very comedic, and we've seen her very much in between. All levels of emotion with that character, to the point where there really, to me, isn't a story they couldn't tell with Felicity now, because she's that well developed of a character. She's like that friend that I really feel we know. And I think she's easily one of my favorite characters because of the character development and the arcs with her. I just find her very identifiable.
Yeah, I can only agree with that.
One of the things I liked about the crossover was, one, I completely agree with you guys are saying about just the interplay and just seeing feel comfortable. I loved seeing the supporting cast interacting with each other. Felicity fits now on Barry, on the Flash. Even though she's an Arrow, she fits completely with them. And it was something that, as the multiple exposures to her, as them interacting, to the point where we had Emma Frost doing some of Caitlin Frost, not Emma Frost. Wrong universe. Wrong universe there.
She must have made me forget that she was on that show. Sorry.
We had Caitlin do a Felicity thing when she first saw the detective. Yeah. And she even came out, is that what Felicity sounds like? And it just felt so natural. And it just, and little comedic moments and little just serious moments, even like the first time when Ollie's first there, all the cops were like, hey, what's this guy doing in our city? He's a killer. We don't want him around. Let's, and it was that whole, Ollie's a little bit more intense than Barry. And I like the fact that the cops trusted the Flash, but they don't completely trust Arrow. It was, the supporting cast were reacting appropriately to all the different characters. I like seeing that.
It is interesting how, I don't know how much sort of realism, if I can use that word, there is there, but you look at the character of Barry even before his powers. He's this upbeat young guy, and then he gets these awesome powers, right? How even in just half a season, he's gotten to a point where the police and the authorities in general seem to trust him. And on Arrow, you have this, this kind of dark, brooding guy who uses bows and arrows. And, you only use bows and arrows. General impression, which the public would have is, you use bows and arrows to kill things, right? They are very different universes. It's interesting to have this fictional world in which these two operate in two different locations, and how each of those cities is its own environment, independent of the other, and how they have different, each of those cities has its own atmosphere.
I think one of the things that I really like about when the characters cross over is it reminds me of what do I like about the Superman-Batman relationship. When it's done right, you get to see Clark's like this great good. He's very clean in what he does and how he presents things, whereas Batman's a little dirtier. He's on the darker edge of everything. With Barry and Ollie, you've got, Barry's this guy who he's not afraid to smile and to have fun, and and he's approachable, and you could see people wanting to be him and being excited by him. I actually quite liked the debates between the two where Ollie talked about how he can't be that person. And he encourages Barry to be that person. He knows there's a distinction between the two of them and how they approach people and what they're capable of being. Ali does not see himself as being what Barry is. I do like that Barry, in their discussions, was seeing things in Ali that Ali was not letting himself see in himself. There was something about the relationship between the two of them. They're very complementary. Barry needs to be a little bit more serious at times and understand training because of the kind of high and heavy hitter characters. There was some foreshadowing to big things are coming for you, Barry. You need to be prepared for them. Mm-hmm. And we got to kind of see Barry learn to step it up a little bit, but also that he's still very much a rookie, still learning the ropes. I quite like that side of Barry's journey. There's something fun and engaging about it that I like the contrast. I would not want them to be the same show. There'd be a problem if it was.
Right. It's interesting to point out how they played off of each other really well and how they're two people who can learn, who probably could learn a lot from each other. You wouldn't want them or expect them to spend a lot of time together because they are very different people and they would drive each other crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know? I do like that I felt at the end of, you're referencing the fact that there was two different episodes because they each went to each other's world. I do like that in both cases, you felt like they walked away changed a little bit by the experience.
One of my favorite things about the Flash episode of the crossover, at least I think it was that episode, is that we see Ali smile and actually kind of laugh once or twice, which he does not do on his own show, hardly ever. But when he's in the Flash's world, it's almost like he can lighten up slightly.
And he can tell he did some more joking around, even if they were Ali-style jokes, like when he shoots Barry with the arrows in the back and during the training. Like, you shot me. He's like, well, they said you heal fast. And he pulls him out. That was, again, it was funny for Ali. That's his way. That's his sense of humor. I like that.
I like that I felt forward advancement of both characters in relation to their own program from both episodes.
Yeah.
Because we had Ali and Felicity on a Barry show, and at the end of that episode I really felt like we were getting like further character development in the relationship between Felicity and Ali. The walls that Ali puts up by his reactions to Barry when it came to Iris. When he was basically trying to give Barry advice that I think we as friends, if we were sitting there at the table, would kind of go to Barry, don't listen to him. But yet understanding that based on Ali's experiences, that's very real to him. He's seen some darkness and horrible things happen to those around him. So that's where it's coming from. He's not trying to hurt Barry. He's really in his own way trying to prevent him from going through the pain that he's clearly going through, which is where I see advancement in his story, because we got to see as fans, wow, this really is having an effect on Ali, to see what's going on with Felicity, how she's moving on without him, and he has to watch that going on. There's a pain there. He's also afraid of her getting hurt by being around him too much because of everything he's experienced. I really liked that so much of that development was happening on the other show, which is, I think, a sign of great writing, because when you have a crossover, if you don't take advantage of hooking people in to the experience of the other program. If somebody wasn't watching Flash, I think you'd walk out of there wanting to watch Flash. If you weren't watching Arrow, you'd walk out of there being interested in saying, wow, I started off on Flash. Maybe I should be watching this Arrow program. It was very good writing for that purpose.
It was all really well done. Yeah. What you were saying makes me wonder, if they do, for instance, a spinoff with Ray Palmer, or if the Supergirl show interacts with those two shows, it makes me wonder, how you would introduce a third element if you did a three-way crossover. What would the dynamics be like then, now that we've seen two-way crossover between with Barry and Ali? Like, what would a three-way crossover with Ray and Ali and Barry be like, or whoever?
I think that's one of the areas where I get worried. I see that working. Like, when you were saying that, I'm nodding. I'm like, because the establishment of Ray Palmer and how he works in the Arrow universe clearly makes him a logical candidate to do that with. I think you could also do that with Firestorm, who's coming up. I'm not saying Firestorm is a spinoff of his own show, but I wouldn't have trouble seeing Firestorm appear on Flash because of how it just kind of is put into this ecosystem. I think it's going to be very interesting to see. The Supergirl one is kind of more interesting to me as far as is Supergirl going to be part of this universe?
Right.
And what does that look like in all of this? It really goes back to kind of what we've been saying since the beginning. It's got to be great, clever writing. If you're going to do things like this, like I felt totally these two crossovers made sense. They felt very fluid. They felt like they advanced the stories where they currently are. I didn't feel like, one thing I liked is I didn't feel like either episode derailed what's been going on in either program. I felt like I still felt forward advancement. And that's really important to me, this sense of progression, because these characters have had a lot of that.
It's interesting you mentioned the progression, and I've noticed on The Flash, it seems like that things are moving along faster on The Flash than they did in the first half season of Arrow in terms of the developments and new uses of the Flash's powers and that kind of thing.
I think with The Flash is either they're trying to catch up or because of the fact that we're dealing with superpowers and we're dealing with the meta powers, that they're able to take it, kind of take it up a notch and go a little bit quicker and just, because I noticed that as well. And I kind of, I like that because it's a different feel than what Arrow had. I love Arrow, and I loved how Arrow, played. It did kind of a slow play, and it was building, and there was always the energy. There was always something cool going on in the episode, but we kept going back to those flashbacks and kept seeing, and we still, to this day, we keep going back, and we still get a little bit more peace, a little bit more peace. I like that about Arrow, but so the fact that Flash is going right from, we saw the ground floor going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked, again, it's a different feel for each show, but you feel they feel like they are the same universe. You're comfortable with the Flash being this way and Arrow being that way, and I'm really digging that about them.
I really like that they've structured these two shows differently rather than just building on the success of Arrow and imitating the structure of it. The structure of the Flash is much different. This isn't as true as it was through the end of last season on Arrow, but Arrow was built, in a lot of ways, built like a soap opera. The rich families, the dynasties, the mom and the husband who died, and the affairs, and the member of the family who was gone for 5 years, and all these kinds of things. It's totally a soap opera. Flash is not built that way at all, really. It's just a different kind of show, and I hope that they learn from that, the success of that, and as they add new shows, make sure that they're different in a way that makes sense for that character.
The one thing I like about the film and television universes being separated in this particular case, and I hope they embrace this, one of the things I love about both programs is the amount of characters we've seen from comics, both heroes and villains, where we've seen references to certain types of characters. This actually would go through most of the DC television universe. We're seeing a lot of characters pop up on screen, whether it's for one visit or two. We've had General Eiling, we've had characters like the whole police environment there. We've had Thawne appear on there. We've got the character who could become Killer Frost. We've got Firestorm. We've got Atom. We've got just a lot of characters. We've got potentially Vibe. And I like that we don't need this immediacy for these characters to necessarily fulfill where they've gone in the comics. Obviously, we've got the Firestorm story gradually unfolding before our eyes. And I really quite like that. But I like that they're not overdoing it. It seems to be something that's integrating into these stories in a way that makes sense for the larger story that's being told for the main character, Barry, in this case, that we're following. To me, if you limit the amount of DC characters and just make them generic, I would be geeking out still because of how well Barry's written. It's so much better when, like, oh my gosh, they just did that character, or wow, what a great nod to that character. It just makes us feel like the world that we've been reading in the comics is unfolding. I like that sometimes I'll watch an episode and go, I know that name, and I have to look it up. It's fun to see that they took that kind of detail and decided to pull somebody from DC mythos rather than just make Thug one, so to speak. I just think it makes the world richer. There's something to that for the fans, while at the same time it's not bogged down in extra narrative that's so geeky that fans who maybe aren't as into the comic lore feel like I'm completely lost at what's going on in this show because they're throwing so much backstory at me, I can't get it. There's a nice, judicious use of characters in a way that I think is accessible to a larger audience while being satisfying for us.
Yeah, I agree. I do like how they're pulling in the people and how they're bringing in, and just these different characters and the nods to them. But the one thing that I've always been thinking about, and this is something I've been thinking about since they brought in Ray Palmer, because I agree, Brandon Routh's doing an awesome job. I love the fact that they're doing it and how they're going and possible spin-offs, but I wonder if they're missing something by not doing a nod to Batman and Superman. Because tell me how cool would that scene have been if instead of Ray Palmer, it was Bruce Wayne, and I would have had the person playing an over the top drunken playboy goofing around, cracking, hitting on Felicity, playing the billionaire playboy over the top, and then he introduced Lucius Fox, who's actually going to run that franchise, or bring back I can't think of the character's name, the guy who was in charge of Queen Enterprises when the dad died, married the mom.
Right.
Can't think that's who was going to be the Wayne representative, and just how it's the whole episode. You have the drunken, goofing Bruce Wayne playboy until the very last second when no one's around and he's sitting in the car. Okay, Alfred, let's go back to Gotham. And he shifts it back into bat mode. Just that one split second.
The problem with that, I mean, not that can't be done well, but the stumbling block there is that you don't want to remind the audience you don't want the guest star to outshine the star of the show. You don't want to remind the audience that there's this other concept out there that's perhaps awesomer, right? Again, that's not to say that can't be done well. And, it would certainly be cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You're talking about all these characters and how rich a resource these comic book adaptations are, in that you have these decades of material and all these characters that you have access to just by ostensibly making a TV series about one guy, be it Arrow or Flash. But all of a sudden you have hundreds of characters you can bring in just from the history of just that character. We live in a time where, either because of the evolution of movies and stuff, evolution of TV shows, in part maybe because of the kinds of special effects that we can do now. We live in a time when studios are always trying to find new material or like remake something or adapt something. And this huge advantage that they have in adapting the comic books is they have all of these stories and characters that they can remake or adapt or introduce. Most, if not all of that stuff, is material which most of the TV audience and the movie audience have never been exposed to. And it's just this rich, rich mine of stuff.
I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of disagree with you a little bit, Jim, in the sense that I wouldn't want it to be Bruce Wayne instead of Ray Palmer. And the reason why is I'm really liking the gradual development of the Atom. We haven't seen the Atom in live action television. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a geeky Batman fan, so if you could get Bruce Wayne on one of these shows, I'm cool with it. But I think the problem is we've seen so much Bruce Wayne, we've seen so much Superman on television, and we're getting another Batman Superman movie. We've got Gotham going on, we got a Krypton series coming, Supergirl's coming, so we're getting more of those worlds being fleshed out on television and in film. What I like is that we're getting Firestorm, we're getting the Atom, we're getting Captain Cold, we're getting Captain Boomerang, Suicide Squad. They're expanding and playing around with character sets that we haven't seen explored in live action. And here's the thing, it's a home run. People are into these shows. They're doing really well to the point that they're doing an animated spin-off with Vixen. That's going to be an animated miniseries. They're expanding these universes out. So we're going to get to see more characters done well and for longer periods. Whereas if we did Bruce Wayne and Lucius, everything you said was cool. So I don't want you to think I'm like sitting here saying like, boy, that idea stunk. No, it didn't. It's a cool idea. But I think it's fresher that we're seeing Ray Palmer. Because for people, it's kind of like what Art's saying, with there being like this expanded universe of characters they can pull from. Like S.H.I.E.L.D., when I'm watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I like the fact that the cast is really characters that aren't your main Marvel characters. We're getting them delivered so well in film, and we're going to be getting a Daredevil TV series, and we're doing a Jessica Jones thing. I'm into all that. But I like that these are characters on S.H.I.E.L.D. that are set in the Marvel Universe, playing in the rules of the Marvel Universe, but they're not. They're not like your main characters. And then you've got Agent Carter, which is kind of going to a character set into Marvel's past. That stuff's neat. I like that we're not beholden to just the top-tier characters that we always see. We're showing that, wow, they're awesome. But look at all these awesome other toys that we have that you can really play around with. I'm not a big fan of these edicts that, well, now that we've got this show, we can't use Superman, Batman, or Wonder Woman on them because of the fact that they're going to be in the films. So that, and I know that's kind of where you're going, Jim, and I do agree with you on that. I think, it'd be cool to do cameos. I guess I'd rather see a Bruce Wayne cameo than Ray Palmer taking a back seat to Bruce Wayne, because it gives us some chance that people like Ray Palmer, maybe they do a spinoff with him. How awesome is that? We get an Adam television show or an Adam mini-series, kind of like what they're... I think this Agent Carter show is showing us that, well, maybe you can do a mini-series on television with some of the characters that are involved in a film or a television show and give them kind of an expanded arc that you couldn't. So I'm a fan of what they're doing right now and going to some of the lesser known characters versus taking, I guess, what I would think would be the easy way out and just going to the big characters that we all know. There's something fresher about exposing us to some characters that aren't. That being said, I'm with you. I would geek out like crazy if Bruce Wayne was on there. So I'm not going to say, oh, that's, too, I don't want that Bruce Wayne guy. No, I would love that. But I think I like more that we're getting to see characters that I'm finding surprising. I'm like, really? You went to the Atom for that? Kind of neat. Different sort of take with that. I'm very anxious to see Firestorm. I'm very anxious to see. I'm very into that idea. I'm a Firestorm fan, so I'm cool. It's like cool to me that like, wait a minute, we're going to get to see Firestorm on TV. How neat is that? And he's going to be, it looks like he's going to have the dual people inside him and all that. It looks like they're going back to the actually original Firestorm storyline. So I'm anxious to see how they're going to do that.
Nice. Yeah, see, and I agree with you. I do dig the fact that they went with Ray Palmer, and I like the fact that all that is. It's one of those things that just, it always pops in my head every so often. And I like the fact that they aren't going to the big names just because, we are getting a different and a fresh take on it. It's, throwback to, Next Generation when they first brought in Captain Picard. People are like, wait, this is a Starship Captain? And then when they went with Voyager with Captain Janeway, wait a minute, hold on. And it was just like, kind of twist and turn people, throw them on there, just kind of catch you off guard where it's not the same characters you're used to in this universe. There is this vast, this vast well that you can pull from. So I like the fact they are going there. But that being said, I still would like to see a reference to, hey, did you see there was some blue streak going on in Metropolis? What was that? Or just a reference to some crazy guy running around in Batman. I heard Gotham's got a vigilante now or something. Just a little reference like that, a little wink and nod to everybody else. I think would be kind of a neat thing to throw in.
I'd like to see it later. And I'm not saying the wink and nods that you're talking about. That's fine at any point in time. I think a more major appearance I'd like to see later when they've had an opportunity to really explore some of the wealth of characters that they've got at DC. because there's a lot of lesser known characters that I just really, like Art. I know you're an Adam Strange fan. I'd love to see Adam Strange on one of these programs, and I think that there's room for him because it would be a neat, different story to see. Barry's probably the one. I'd love to see him Zeta beamed somewhere. That'd be really cool. There's characters in DC's mythology that would, I think, play very well with either or of these characters that I would love to see people get to know. I think that's the way ultimately to, if you look at these shows, an opportunity is often missed because of the huge financials in television and film to point people back to the source material. And I think when you show a rich wealth of characters, people are gonna get interested. And not everybody, but when you look at the numbers you're dealing with these programs, some of them got to eventually start taking a peek, right? Somebody, even if it's an eighth of the audience that considers picking up a graphic novel or something like that because of this. So I think having interesting characters that people might want to, like if Firestorm is interesting on this, maybe people seek out some old Firestorm comics or something out of it, or some trades, and just because, okay, I want to know more about this character's backstory. What was he like in the other medium? I hope stuff like that happens out of this. I don't know how much it does, but I would love to see more of that happen because I think there's an interesting opportunity from these programs by just having a larger wealth of characters.
Yeah, I wish they could do a hard sell, more of a stronger advertisement towards the comic book universe. But I guess because of legals and yada yada and different companies, et cetera, they don't do a direct hard cross sell.
I think it's cost. I think it's cost too, though. Commercial cost is very high, so it's kind of an unfortunate, harsh reality that's the issue. What do you guys think of the, I want to make sure we talk about this because we were left in Flash with a season cliffhanger involving the Reverse Flash. And we finally saw that start to be paid off, and we saw what the reveal was. What do you guys think of the Reverse Flash reveal? Was it what you were expecting? Were you satisfied with it? Has it left you intrigued for more? Where are you kind of falling in where that I think a very big happening for a midway point in the first season of this show for an entry-level show.
I'm not sure if we actually know what's going on yet in terms of the Reverse Flash. I don't think it's maybe as cut and dry as maybe it looks with Wells and the Reverse Flash. And
you guys do you think it's, even though that the costume was in Wells' hidden cave, you're thinking that doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's him?
Yeah,
exactly.
I think so, because they have strung this along. One of my favorite things about this show is how they keep revealing these things about Wells and what he's up to, but all of them are really cryptic. We really don't know much yet. Really don't. Despite having been shown him doing all these things, we kind of don't know what he's up to or why he's doing it.
I think they're doing, and this doesn't necessarily negate anything either of you are saying, this is my speculation. So this is my take on it. I think they're doing the storyline where the Reverse Flash, his main goal is to build a better Flash. And he's got a very twisted way to do it. So I think it's Wells. I've thought it was Wells potentially since the beginning. I did think there was a possibility that it's Thawne, the boyfriend, just because of the fact that he's from that family. So I guess I'm not really differing from what you're saying. I do think there's more than potential for more than one Reverse Flash on the show because of the fact that we've had that in the comics as well. But I do think that they're doing the story with this where Harrison Wells is really doing what he's saying. He's trying to build a better Flash. He's trying to have Barry do these things. I'm thinking he went back. I think he went back through time to cause that tragedy for Barry, to put Barry in a position where Barry would become this character. But he's very twisted and so I think it's a comic story that they're playing out. But that's my take. It's speculation.
I wonder if he's doing it because he has seen the future and he sees this crisis, and this crisis needs the Flash, and so he's trying, to build a better Flash, but going about it in a very sort of mad scientist kind of way.
Oh, definitely. To quote the Doctor, I think we have a timey-wimey thing going on here.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking this Reverse Flash, it's the costume based, and why it was in Wells's suit in Wells's hidden room. That was the original costume that the Reverse Flash eventually is going to wear. He put the thing on. He put the stolen that harness, which was part of that stolen tech. He put that on the costume to charge it. So that's why his voice did the little voice fluctuation when he had it, when he put it on, when he said Merry Christmas to it. But I think that costume takes time to charge. So I'm thinking someone in the future is going to put on that costume that he just started charging in the present day, come back to the past. And I guess I'm guessing Wells's motivation is to create a stronger Flash, but the person who's actually going to put on that costume is a member of the Thrawn family. That's why when he ran up to the detective, he didn't kill the detective because he can't kill his ancestor because to prevent his future, he doesn't want to change his future. And the other thing I'm thinking,
what if Wells isn't Wells?
What if he's like another character that we know, just going by a different name right now?
What if he is Thrawn? What if he is not the boyfriend? What if he is a future ancestor? What if he's part of that family?
Could be.
Right.
Hey,
yeah.
It definitely could be. I've been saying Wells isn't his real name from the beginning because of the whole H.G. Wells thing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That would be exactly the kind of name that an overconfident mad scientist would come up with.
Right.
Yeah. Because here's the thing that you think back to the scenes where the Reverse Flash was quote unquote trapped. Wells was standing right there. So we have the Wells and the Reverse Flash in the same room at the same time.
So it kind of begs the question, it kind of depends on like what rules of time travel they're going to use. Is it possible for the same person to be in the same location but from a different time period?
Did he charge the suit so it looked like it was him?
No. I love that we don't know. I think
I do too.
That they're doing a great job of stringing us along without doing it in an annoying way.
I like that it's not beholden to being dark. Like, I like that dark things happen on that show, but, like, it's very bright. It's more uplifting than Arrow. I love Arrow because I like the Batman archetype, so I'm into that whole thing. I was a big fan of the Longbow Hunters and the Mike Grell stuff when that kicked in. That was when I really started reading Ollie exclusively. So I like that style of Arrow, but to me, a lot of times once you have a successful show that's going that route, if you're going to do something in the same universe, you feel beholden to make the other show that dark. And that hasn't been the case with The Flash. They've really done a great job of giving us a very accessible, friendly, likable, fun Barry, who's human. He has some down moments, but he still feels very Barry. And very much like a guy that you could like hang out with, and he's a friend, and he's normal. There's something to him, and I think, to me, that makes Ollie stand out more when they're together in a way that I think is far more interesting, because they didn't feel beholden to go that extra dark route.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a smart move, to differentiate those things. It makes a lot of sense. It's smart, to not think that you have to imitate the success of Arrow. Mm-hmm. Instead, to take it as a cue that people are ready for more of the comic book stuff, and do more comic book stuff that's not the same. I think that's a pretty mature response to the success of Arrow.
Yeah, see, I think Vixen, for example, will be far more interesting if they really embrace the concept behind Vixen, but show us her partially through the eyes of Arrow and the Flash, because of the fact that you're allowed to have those characters in the animated series because of it. I think that I don't know how long it's going to be, but it looks like it's going to be some kind of animated miniseries. I just think that to me is far more interesting than if all these characters were the same. Mm-hmm. They're doing a really good job.
It reflects how things are in the comic books. It's one of the great things about superhero comic books is how different in tone things can be from one title to the next, just because of the long histories that these characters have, and they were conceived in different time periods by different creators, and you have these huge universes of all these characters who you can pick and choose from, and like you were saying earlier, you can choose a relatively obscure character and give them their own show and make it work. Whereas look what Marvel did with Guardians of the Galaxy. You know?
Oh, yeah.
They took this concept and these characters, which nobody had heard of, just us geeks, and made it sing. It just goes to show it opens up doors, basically. It means you can do anything as long as you would do it well.
You know, I walked out of that movie thinking to myself, one of the better movies, superhero movies that I've seen, validating everything you're saying about it being, you know, such characters that you wouldn't expect that out of. I think that's why. I was so blown away by how interesting it was that it was very different characters, and they didn't go to your traditional big name characters at any point in time during the film. They really embraced the concept like this is about this mismatched group, and it was so much more fun because of that. So I'm glad to see that they're seeing success with experimenting with some of the and being true to a lot of the comic properties that they're doing that with, not feeling like you've got to drastically change it. I know they've modernized and refreshed some of the Guardians in the movie, but you know, Rocket Raccoon. I read the Rocket Raccoon when I was a kid, and I adored every minute of it. I would have never in a million years said we're going to see Rocket Raccoon in a movie with a with a talking tree. and I'm actually sitting here right on my desk I've got the they've got those bobbleheads. I've got the Dancing Groot bobblehead right now, which tells you how much I really liked that movie. When I saw that they have this, I pre-ordered it. This, you know, from the Funko, that little Funko line that's out there. I just grabbed it because I liked that movie so much. I thought it was so much fun that I'm like, I need to, it's not a want. I needed to have that.
You need help. You
haven't seen the movie.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, I still haven't seen the movie.
Yeah.
I know.
What?
Yes. When you see the movie, you'll need to have one too.
Oh man!
Let me throw something out to you guys, because at the end of the Man in Yellow episode with Flash, Cisco and Detective West are talking, and Barry has always said there was the red and yellow lightning, you know, and Cisco, you know, is basically telling him, hey, there was two there the night Barry, you know, his mom died. Do you guys think it's possible that Time Traveler, Yellow, you know, Reverse Flash and Flash both travel back in time that day?
That would make sense.
That the mom died, because you think about the episode. There's the one scene where Barry's there, and then all of a sudden he's blocks away. Somebody took him away from that area. You know, that could have very easily have been Barry in that time saving the younger version of himself.
This is one of my favorite things about this show is all the possibilities here.
Yeah.
And that we don't know. And you know, maybe Reverse Flash or whoever it is who goes back and kills his mom, like maybe they're going back in time for a very different purpose, but they wind up doing that as an accident, or they think it has to be done for this or this reason or whatever, not necessarily the reasons that we're suspecting Wells might have.
It'd be fun if they play with the story. What happens if Barry goes back and saves mom, and things go horribly wrong because he does?
Oh, right.
Because remember, with time, when you go through time and you change one pivotal event, it has catastrophic outcomes many times in time travel stories in the future.
Could have essentially Barry's "It's a Wonderful Life" moment, you know, realizing that my mom has to die. Right?
How
awful
horrible
would that be?
Yeah.
But
how horrible would it be if Barry has to kill his own mom?
Not kill, choose to not save.
Right.
There's a distinction between the two, because, you know, what if the reason why both Blurs are there is because Barry was trying to save her, but then later finds out he can't.
Right, like this is yeah.
So there is a distinction between the two, because by saving her and changing time, Does he wreck time? Does he ruin time? That's speculation on my part. Going back to what Art said, I ditto. This is fun. This is when you know you're really enjoying a show, when you're geeking out about possibilities that may or may not even be a part of the whole storyline. But how cool is that this show, in a very short period of time, has become that captivating and interesting. It's not a spin-off, just a spin-off, I should say. It is a spin-off, but it's not just a spin-off. A lot of times when you get a spin-off, it becomes a very watered-down version of the show that it came off of. This is its own rich entity that occupies the same universe as Arrow, but has its own thing going on that makes it just as valid and unique because of that. And I think that's why it's working, because it's not trying to be Arrow 2.0. It's not trying to be an extension of Arrow. It's its own thing that happens to be able to cross over into it. Far more interesting.
I like, this is going back to the crossover episode, I like how quickly Wells worked out who the Arrow was. Mm-hmm. He did that like in a night of research, basically, right? Or something, you know?
But he's also clearly pulling from databases that, right. I mean, you know, what is he pulling from? Because he's able to pull from the future. So what is he able to access that we can't see off camera? That mystery element to him, you know, first of all, he could be pulling from things present day, from contacts he has. So yes, but there's another level to what he's got. There's a level of sneaky. It's funny as the show goes on, the less. Before I was kind of looking for an out for him to trust him. Like maybe it's not what I'm seeing. Now I'm finding that I don't trust him at all.
Right.
And it's far more interesting that he's right there with everybody. And we know that.
In his wheelchair, you know, looking all harmless. In the episode, he reveals to Oliver that he knows that he's Oliver Queen, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I think that's really interesting. That he's kind of almost like he's putting it out there as like a threat or as a challenge, kind of like letting Oliver know that he has power.
I like that Oliver finds his own way of trying to ensure that he doesn't have to deal with Wells, but letting Wells know that he very well could. It was a very interesting interplay between them throughout the episode. I liked the pacing of that too, that it wasn't limited to just one discussion about it. There was the initial shocked discussion, but then there was the comeback discussion, kind of pleading with using the fact that this could hurt my family and, you know, people close to me and all that. But then also the implied, you know, you don't want to be on the other side of me if that happens. It was a very interesting interplay. I totally agree with you. I caught the threat from Wells. That was totally what I got from it as well. But it wasn't just Wells kind of winking and nodding that like this could be a problem. Ollie kind of handled that as well. It's very interesting to see that. I would love to see a follow-up at some point with them.
Yeah, it's really interesting that Wells said that out loud. I think is actually really telling. It's like he's up to something. He has this sort of a sense of what he can get away with, which I find really interesting.
Well, the Flash heroes, all of the full Flash, the support staff, completely trust him, and he knows he has that complete trust. So when you have that complete trust, you can kind of let a little bit of the darkness out, and you know, it'll be dismissed by the people that, you know, your inner circle as just being, you know, whatever. They won't pick up the clues. They won't pick up, hey, he just threatened him. That won't enter their head. They'll see it more as just them having a discussion or them having a more intense discussion, them going, you know, face to face. But they won't see him as a threat because they have such a deep trust for him.
You know, was it Tony, the bully from Barry's childhood?
No, right.
I like that they kind of caught Wells on his, what did you do? You let him out?
Yeah.
kind of thing. I liked how that played out, that became a part of the episode where they were like, what's going on here? There was something to that I found interesting. that Wells had to let that part out, and his justification, I don't know that it's set right with them when he did it.
No, it didn't. I think that they understood it, but it did not sit well. Yeah.
I'm also going to be curious when we find out what actually happened to Ronnie.
Yeah.
Did Wells have anything to do with that? Did Wells know anything? How much did Wells know about Ronnie being around? Because we know Wells has seen or is from the future. So what, if anything, does Wells know about that? Is something that I'm interested to see.
Mm-hmm. I'm guessing that Ronnie was a complete setup by Wells. And I think that's what's going to be the turning factor in Caitlin going from being the sweet, good person to becoming Killer Frost. I think she's going to learn the truth about Dr. Wells, or part of the truth, and she's going to be out for vengeance, and something will happen to her. So you add to it, something happens to her. She sees him as this evil guy who needs to be stopped. So she's going to take it to him. And now you've got Barry trusting Wells and thinking his friend just got corrupted by power.
I hope not. And let me explain why I hope not. We're going to, I think this season, we're going to lose Wells as a part of the team, I think, unless there's a swerve coming, which there could very well be, because you both in your own ways have alluded to that possibility earlier on in the episode where maybe it's not him, maybe there's another party, and yet we'll keep the mystery up of what's L. Wells' motivation and who is he. So leaving that on the table, I would eventually like to see her become Killer Frost, but I would like a larger arc for her, because I just like the interplay of Cisco, her, and Barry right now. I want to see everything you're saying. I'd like to see her head down that path. I think it'd be a shame if it happens too soon. I'd like to see that seasons down the road where events lead to a progression or, a breaking point that would lead her to that versus seeing it right now, because I just think her interplay with Barry right now and with Cisco, I think is very interesting, and there's a lot more to do with that before we get to that point. I wouldn't be disappointed if they did it sooner, but I would think there would be an opportunity missed on some level, because I do quite like her in this role at the moment.
Yeah, I think we need more from her. I think that we need to know. I feel like I need to get to know her better. She is, not that I hate her or anything, but she's my least favorite character on the show. I'm not really sure why. I don't feel enough of a connection with her yet.
She said you're her favorite audience member.
Oh, really? That's weird.
I thought it was too. I'm like, she knows art.
How weird is that?
See, I think it's the way they have her written is why, because they make Cisco so outgoing and so friendly, and Barry so outgoing and friendly, and she's the cold fish who's now slowly starting to warm up to people and starting to interact. And I think the fact that the kind of the teased relationship, or the fact that she's maybe starting to have stronger feelings towards Barry, I think is going to be something that's going to bring her out and bring the character development. That
would be interesting to see. Yeah.
Let's talk about the relationship with Iris and Barry, where it's gone. There's this relationship developing where Barry had to step away from Iris as Barry, but then was developing a relationship with her as Flash. Then things took a turn, and she got closer to her boyfriend because of things that happened and secrets being kept by the Flash, to the point where she doesn't trust him now, and she believes her boyfriend was right now, that he's a threat and he's dangerous and things like that. And we see a really emotional roller coaster between them. I find myself, in spite of all that, rooting for the two of them. I really think it's a very well-developed relationship that circumstances and secrets have kept them apart in this. I like that he did the reveal of his feelings to her. I thought that was really well done. I like that she knows that and has to look at him knowing that. Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting. I like what happened with him and her, with him as the Flash. It's just been a really interesting, unique sort of drama building between the two of them that has made me, through the gradual build of this, root for the two of them. But I'm glad they're not jumping to it. I want to see it build over time. I do want to see them eventually together, but I am so much more interested in the journey right now.
Yeah, it's a kind of relationship which I think a lot of people can identify with, especially just in terms of your own individual experience. Like really liking somebody who you think doesn't know you exist or doesn't realize you feel that way about them. And I think it's a really good relationship for the way that they write the Barry Allen character and the way that the actor plays him. I think that kind of relationship is just a really good choice, I think.
Yeah, there have been times when I'm watching and I'm just yelling at the TV, "Tell her! Come on, man, tell her!" Yeah,
and she's so happy all the time. It's like the way the character is written, she's just always, like happy and really upbeat. And you can see like why he likes her, doesn't want to upset the cart, kind of.
Mm-hmm. I love Detective West, the fact that he's known the entire time,
right.
And he's, it is just, that was just a great moment between Barry and him when he's like, "I've known, come on, I've watched you two grow up, I know you," and that was a really cool, again, there's some very human, just great, interaction moments that you're just like, this is awesome. This is neat. This isn't just about a guy who runs super fast. There are these real human interactions.
Yeah, I think that the Detective West character is a really smart. I don't know if this is something based on the comic books. Is that character an invention of the show?
Ooh, boy. Yeah, I think so. As a concept, they've had him have, though, like in the current comic, a father figure mentor. It wasn't, though, that he lived with Iris.
Okay.
So there's an archetype that's being done there that's currently in the comic, or has been in the comic, but it's not this character.
I just think it's a really smart inclusion in the show. It's a relationship and a character that the show really needs, and I think it's a really smart move. It kind of helps to balance things and to have the inclusion of a more mature perspective on things. You have this guy that's been around the block a few times, right?
I quite like the fact that he adds yet another reason why the two of them shouldn't be together. Like Barry already questions himself, as far as for her safety and things like that. But with him being her dad and him being on the police and working with Barry and all of that, he adds another wrinkle into it that really validates Barry's reasons for holding back a bit.
Right, yeah.
And not quite telling her everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really smart character. It's a good choice to have that character there, and the actor that plays him, whose name I can't recall, but he's great, I think.
Jesse Martin.
Yeah, he's what other show was he on? I can't remember. He was on like one of the CSI shows or something.
I forget, but he's terrific. I know exactly what.
He's great.
Yeah, he was also in Rent too.
Oh, okay.
Let's talk a little bit about Arrow, if we could, because we had that mid-season finale with Arrow, and I want to make sure
he's dead. He's dead.
Ra's al Ghul, which I didn't see that coming, and it came pretty quick in that episode.
I gotta say, I commented about this. I can't remember where. Maybe it was on Facebook or elsewhere. But was really not a fair fight. Ollie just climbed a dang mountain. His arms are tired. Mm-hmm. And then he has to sword fight this guy.
Ra's made the same climb.
Oh, did he? Well, he was standing around waiting, though. He had time to rest.
Well, because he's Ra's al Ghul, that's why.
Right.
Either that, or maybe he knew where the elevator was, and he took the elevator.
Yeah, he did not look tired. To me, he looked well rested.
I thought the whole principle behind it is both people have to climb the mountain.
Okay.
And then if they survive the climb, then they fight.
Well, did all of those guys climb then? Like, he had a little, like a retinue up there.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, there was just the two up there with him.
It was what's her name? And then I thought that there was like another one or two guys who were just like hanging back. I thought, no?
I thought it was just her and there was just the two. There was his daughter and I'm drawing blank on names, and the other guy.
Huh. Okay. So, that's like a team climb.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, maybe they got to use ropes or something.
Yeah.
Or they flew in by helicopter and Raish climbed, or they all took the helicopter and it's called home court advantage for a reason.
Right. Home court advantage. But I love the line about Raj, whatever. He says he doesn't need a sword. I'll use yours when you're done with it. I thought it was a great line.
That's a tough guy. When you got double swords and he's like, no, I'll kill you with one of yours.
You're done.
Right there, that's when you go, I may be in trouble.
I might have made a mistake.
I'm looking at it right now. There's his daughter.
Okay.
The friend of Ali that we've been seeing in the flashbacks, and Raish.
Okay.
Are on the mountain. They were clearly there beforehand when Ali showed up. It is very interesting. And how did all those swords get up there?
Had to carry the sword.
Yeah, there's like quite a bit up. There's this big trunk of swords and things like that. It was. I really liked the idea that this is this intimidating presence that was able to take down Ali. We've seen Ali do all this training, all these skills that he's developed and things like that throughout the series. Ali's very, very formidable. And Raish notices that, acknowledges that, and yet still makes short work of him. I guess I thought that was refreshing. I wouldn't want to see that all the time, but in this particular case, considering the character and what you've been saying about him all along, there's something to that. And it leads to the inevitable, I want to see round 2. I really do want to see these two fight again.
I'm definitely all in for round 2 because it's going to happen. The show's called Arrow for a reason. Ali's not dead. He's mostly dead. He's not completely dead. So he's got a shot at coming back. And I think that the fact that Ali will, in the eyes of the league, is dead. So Raj won. So that ends that blood feud. And if Ali's tough enough to come back from the dead, that could get him some points with the league to the point where maybe they won't try to kill him again. But there's going to be another fight. And I'm curious to see if Ali does better next time.
Well, what happens if they find out about the sister? They find the truth.
Oh. And then realize that he did it, as just a way to protect her or whatever.
Right.
Huh. Oh. I wonder if we'll see the rematch by the end of the season, kind of like we had the way that they built the second season around Slade Wilson. I wonder if we'll have that by the end of the season or if they'll stretch that into next season.
Thea doesn't know that Ali is Arrow. But Ali knows now that Thea has been being trained by Malcolm, that Malcolm set up Thea, which Thea doesn't know.
Uh-huh.
There's a whole bunch of intrigue going on there. So right now, by doing what he's done, Malcolm still has the opportunity to continue to build this twisted relationship with Thea, because he used Thea and basically used her as a sleeper agent to kill. So to protect himself, really, for all extents and purposes, he did this to protect himself, knowing that Ali would protect Thea when the time came. What a twisted... And I love that because I did not see it coming. I thought there was a genuine affection for Malcolm for his daughter. And
he's not that kind of guy.
No, I actually quite loved that because it's more true to the character that we saw with what he did with Tommy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a guy who, in his own way, loves these people, but his own way is a twisted, weird way.
He's definitely not going to win Father of the Year.
No.
And I am curious though, because here's something that just kind of popped in my head. Originally, Ali knew he couldn't tell Raj the truth, that it was Thea, because the code, Thea would still have to die.
Mm-hmm.
But by doing what he did, by dying and coming back, will Ollie have earned enough street cred with the League of Assassins that he could get his sister a pass and say,
Right.
hey, I won't protect Malcolm anymore. Kill him if you want. Leave my sister alone.
Why would he do that? Would you, knowing that Raish killed you, would you take the chance if you did that, if you were willing to, because he went up there knowing that he was probably going to die. Would you go and then say, hey, I just died for this, but now that I'm back and we're buddies, my sister did it. I don't see that being something that's going to come into play. I don't care how much cred you got at that point. That's not to say that I don't think that there's a possibility that it will be discovered, but I don't think that's how it's going to be discovered.
Yeah, hold on. I don't think Ollie's going to be the one to tell them, but I think they find out.
And then Ollie uses some of his pull for what he went through as a way to protect. See that I actually quite like that, and I have no issue with that. I don't see Ollie having anything to do with the reveal, though.
No, 100% agree with that. He went up there knowing he was going to die to protect his sister. There's no way he's going to trust them with the truth, but somehow they're going to find out. And I think, and that's where everything's going to get wonky because the League has the code. There's very, very specific. That's the person who killed her. You know, she's got to die. Even though she wasn't of right mind, you know, what they would do for her is they'd be generous and give her a quick and painless death because she was under mind control. That's their way of being generous. But, you know, she still has to die. But if Ollie, again, who knows what can happen out of dying and coming back from the dead. That could actually help them out.
That's a storyline that they can easily carry into next season too.
Oh yeah, I like the character of Roy and the character of Laurel as the series has gone on too. That they haven't stayed to one, like, because Roy started off very much as somebody you were kind of like he's the bad boy who went hero, but then after realizing that he killed somebody and thinking it was Sarah originally, he's gone to a very dark spot because of it and still haunted by that. And Laurel has her own self been haunted by and been inspired by Sarah's death, which led to the introduction of Ted Grant into the show. I really have loved the way that there's more than one arc going on here. Jim, you mentioned before how the show's called Arrow and it's about Ollie. I love that it's not as simple as that, though, because all the characters from Diggle to Laurel to Quentin, you know, the father, to Roy, they're all got their interesting things going on. There's a lot of depth here of things that, you know, Art's mentioning things could carry over to next season. There's a lot of things that we know don't need to be paid off this season. Some of them clearly well as a way to give some finality to what's going on this season, but not all of them well. There are going to be things that are going to be larger arcs that won't carry over, and I like that kind of planning. You know, okay, we got through a first season, which I think the show was clearly written differently the first season, not knowing if there'd be a second. Now that you were they had a very hugely successful first season, they knew we can start looking ahead a bit.
Right.
And it's clear that the show is kind of built in that direction of looking ahead a bit. And I think The Flash has benefited from that in the sense that we mentioned the different sort of pacing to The Flash and the different sort of outlook to it. I think it's because of the fact that season 1 of Arrow was so successful, it has to affect the writing process of this. You know, season 1 of Arrow was successful. Season 2 was so interesting and introduced the concept of the Flash, you know, introduced Barry. You know, now they're kind of looking at, wow, we're still, you know, hitting full thrusters. We've got 2 shows going now. We're going to look big and keep looking to the future. What more can we do? Bigger stories, and also build towards larger concepts that have a lot of life beyond just the current season. I think that first season of Arrow was very critical to setting up these opportunities, and then season 2 just built on that. And I think we're benefiting as, if you look at the conversation we're having now, how we're speculating so much on both programs where they could go, we're benefiting from that foundation.
It'll be interesting, at the end of this season to look back on it, because looking at the second season, I thought that the second season was structured really well and written well in terms of how they built to and these reveals, the whole Slade Wilson story, and things like, we knew that Oliver was responsible for Slade's missing eye, and we knew that like most of the season, if not the whole season, and yet it's not until the end of the season in the flashbacks that we finally see exactly how it played out. The arrival of Slade Wilson in Starling City and how that played out, I just thought that the structure of that was just really great.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that structuring was really good, because that was actually something that was paid off, a lot of that, from the first season. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was nice to see how that paid off from, the first season was really Ollie versus Merlin. The second season was Ollie versus Slade. And it was great to see how that was something that was built over a larger arc. And I loved how that all paid off in this. Mm-hmm.
I was actually kind of just the sheer amount of tension in the room when Oliver comes in and there's Slade Wilson with his mom. And just like that moment was like, oh dear. And I don't know if this is a thing that was teased or there were hints about, but I was completely surprised when Slade killed Oliver's mom. Completely surprised by that moment.
Yeah, because I kept
not expecting that.
I also felt like Ollie was going to save her.
Right. Yeah, or something. Once you run a sword through a guy's mom, she's probably dead. That moment, it's like, well, they did that. Wow.
It's funny because that sequence was one of those, pause the show moments where I just I'm like, and I pause the show and I'm looking at that scene. There have been a couple throughout the series that you're just looking at it going, okay, is there any way maybe we could get some TV trickery? And you're just like, no, she's dead. Like when Ollie fought Raz, I was looking and I paused the sword strikes. I'm like, okay, what organs is he hitting? Oh, he's hitting vital organs. Yeah, that's not good. And you're just like, he's dead. How do you survive that? And you get those moments on the show where you're just like, whoa, that's a dead person. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ollie, it's a no-brainer how he's surviving that. It's Lazarus Pit, but
right.
And I can't wait to see how that's going to play off. That they're going to do something like that.
It'll be interesting to see how many episodes we go without Ollie in them, basically.
We're going to get more Arsenal, and I do like the fact that they're calling Roy Arsenal. I did cheer when they started, giving him that code word. Arsenal and Diggle, I think, are holding the fort.
It'll be interesting because that puts Diggle in a very different role that he'll have to adapt to. Because at that point he's the senior guy, right? He's kind of in charge because he has more experience at this point than Roy does.
And what does that mean for Felicity's role? It's going to be very interesting to see, with Felicity developing this relationship with Ray Palmer. Mm-hmm. What does that mean for her in this capacity? Mm-hmm. Because she's also, technically both of them are senior members to Roy.
Right.
And what does it also mean for Laurel?
Well, my understanding is that this is when Laurel takes on the Black Canary identity, is in Oliver's absence.
It's going to be, I'm very interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I like her doing that. I like, just the first time she put on the jacket, and she got her butt kicked, and she's like, it felt right. And I was I was sitting again, another one of those, I'm sitting there cheering, as I'm watching the show going, oh yeah, because I love the sister. I thought that was great how she was, and she was league trained and everything. The way they played out that story, I thought that was wonderful. But the whole time, I am wanting Laurel to become Black Canary. I am wanting her and Ollie together, even though the Ollie Felicity angle is awesome. It's just, there are these stuff from the comics that I want to see on the big screen.
I tell you what I really want. If they do a spinoff, I want a spinoff that has Ray Palmer and Felicity in it. Not that I don't want her on Arrow. I just think that those two, the actors and the characters, play off each other really well. I think that would be a really fun show.
I concur on that one because I think she should be on both shows.
Yeah. Sure.
More Felicity, I'm happy.
Come on, Skreel. Let's pay these Plutonian beam makers a visit.
Want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. Show voicemails will come back on our next episode, which is actually part 2 of this. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We love having you part of the show. Those are always available on our website and in our show notes. And that's the way, speaking of our websites, ragingbullets.com. You'll always find news and what's going on with the podcast. You'll also find links to all of us in social media and gaming and all kinds of stuff like that in the About Us section, so it's a great way to find out how to contact us. It does feed directly into our Twitter account. And we're also on Facebook with a regular Facebook fan page. We've got a wonderful Facebook group, which if there's one spot I'm going to tell you to hit, it's that Facebook group community. It's a wonderful group of people who participate and post there, including friend of the show, Art Lyon. And we're on Google+. So you want to find us, we're available on social media. And I want to thank everyone who shouts out our podcast in all kinds of different places. You may think you're just shouting out one or two people about the podcast, but for us, that's the way that people get to know about our podcast. And I encourage you to do that, not just with us, but any podcast you listen to. If you're enjoying it, show some love and let people know that these podcasts are out there, because that's really what we rely on to get listenership. And you guys have been incredibly supportive of us, and we appreciate it. Sponsoring this episode, once again, is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Remember to go over to DCBService.com and order your own mother box. I mean, I just think it's the coolest thing to say. Because we all want one, right? It's regularly $59.95, 32% off, only $40.77. Remember, they're a digital partner. Whatever digital shopping that you're doing, whether you're doing My Digital Comics or Comixology, you link those accounts to your DCB Service account and get 5% of those purchases towards your DCB Service order. Over at InStockTrades.com, check out Aquaman and the Others, 50% off for the Volume 1, only $8.49. Legendary Star-Lord, featuring the artwork of longtime friend of the show, Freddie E. Williams II, only $8.49 for Volume 1 of that book, 50% off. This is one of the deals of the week that they do over at InStockTrades.com. Remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. So it's great if there's a number of trades that you're looking for to bundle them together and save money on shipping on top of the amazing discounts. That's DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Our next episode, as I mentioned, we are going to be having part 2 of this discussion, where we continue talking about our current DC television. Jim and I are going to go into our discussion about Constantine. We'll share some listener voicemails, and then we'll be back the following week with a discussion about DC's weekly books. We're going to be discussing DC's all of the weekly titles, because there's a number of them that you and I haven't really talked about in a while. We've talked a lot of Batman Eternal recently, but we haven't really had a chance to focus on all the books. So we're going to touch on Eternal again, but besides that, we're going to talk about Future's End. We're going to talk about the stuff that's going on in Earth 2 World's End, and actually we're going to talk about the regular Earth 2 book as well, because I don't know how you can talk about World's End without talking about the events that are going on in Earth 2 in general, and just how that's going to impact the DC universe. So we will see you. Actually, it'll be in a few days. It's not going to be quite a week. We're going to be back with part 2 in a few days. So we will see you then.
Bye.
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can two grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Seguin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plot line, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.